Genesis 32. It says, as Jacob started on his way again, angels of God came to meet him. Angels are instructors of God, helpers. This is God's camp, so he named that place in my hand. Then Jacob sent messengers ahead to his brother Esau, who was living in the region of Seir in the land of Edom. He told them, give this message to my master Esau. Humble greetings from your servant Jacob. Until now, I have been living with my uncle Laban, and now I own cattle, donkeys, flocks of sheep and goats, and many servants, both men and women. I have sent these messengers to inform my lord of my coming, hoping that you would be friendly to me. After delivering the message, the messengers returned to Jacob and reported, we met your brother Esau, and he is already on his way to meet you. With an army of 400 men, Jacob was terrified at the news, and he divided his household, along with the flocks and herds and camels, into two groups. He thought, if Esau meets one group and attacks it, perhaps the other group can escape. And then he, Jacob, prayed, O God of my grandfather Abraham and the God of my father Isaac. O Lord, you told me, return to your own land and to your relatives, and you promised me, I will treat you kindly. I'm not worthy of all the unfailing unfaithfulness you have shown to me. Your servant. When I left home and crossed the Jordan River, I owned nothing except a walking stick. Now my household fills 2 large camps. So notice when he was in trouble, he prayed to God. Like I did when I was homeless, I was like praying. Now my household fills 2 large camps. Oh Lord, please rescue me from the hand of my brother Esau. I'm afraid that he is coming to attack me along with my wives and children. But you promised me I will surely treat you kindly, and I will multiply your descendants until they become as numerous as the sands along the seashore, too many to count. Jacob stayed where he was for the night, and then he selected these gifts from his possessions to present to his brother Esau: 2 female goats, 20 male goats, 2 eels, 2 rams, 30 female camels with their young, 40 cows, 10 bulls, 20 female donkeys, and 10 male donkeys. He divided these animals into herds and assigned each to different servants. And then he told the servants, go ahead of me with the animals, or keep some distance between the herds. He gave these instructions to the man leading the first group, and when my brother Esau meets you, he will ask, whose servant are you? Where are you going? Who owns these animals? And you must reply, they belong to your servant Jacob, but they are a gift to his master Esau. Look, he is coming right behind us. And then Jacob gave the same instructions to the second and third herdsmen and to all who followed behind the herds. You must say the same thing to Esau when you meet him, and be sure to say, look, your servant Jacob is right behind us. And Jacob thought, I will try to appease him by sending gifts ahead to me. When I see him in person, perhaps he will be friendly to me. So the gifts were sent on ahead, while Jacob himself spent that night in the camp. Now, the next paragraph is called Jacob Rescues with God. Genesis 33, not 33, Genesis 32, verse 22. And during that night, Jacob got up and took his 2 wives and 2 servant wives and his 11 sons and crossed the Jabbok River with them. After taking them to the other side, he sent over all his possessions. Just left Jacob all alone in the camp. And a man came and wrestled with him until the dawn began to break. When the man saw that he would not win the match, he touched Jacob's hip and wrenched it out of its socket. Then the man said, "Let me go, for the dawn is breaking." But Jacob said, "I will not let you go unless you bless me." "What is your name?" the man asked. He replied, "Jacob." "Your name will no longer be Jacob," the man told him. From now on, you will be called Israel, because you have fought with God and with men and have won. "Please tell me your name," Jacob said. And he said, "Why do you want to know my name?" The man replied. Then he blessed Jacob there. Jacob named that place Peniel, which means face of God. For he said, "I have seen God's face to face, yet my life has been spared." The sun was rising as Jacob left Peniel, and he was limping because of the injury to his hip. Even today, the people of Israel don't eat the tendon near the hip socket because of what happened that night when the man strained the tendon of Jacob's hip. So, Genesis chapter 33, Jacob and Esau make peace. And then Jacob looked up and saw Esau coming with his 400 men. So he divided the children among Leah, Rachel, and his 2 servant wives. He put the servant wives and their children at the front, Leah and her children next, and Rachel and Joseph last. Then Jacob went on ahead. As he approached his brother, he bowed to the ground 7 times before him. And then Esau wanted to meet. Bitterness, Genesis chapter 33, 1-11. It is nice to see Esau's change of heart when the 2 brothers meet again. The bitterness over losing his birthright and blessing seems gone. Instead, Esau is content with what he has. Jacob even exclaims how great it is to see his brother's friendly smile. Have you ever felt bitter after being cheated by someone? Yeah. We can remove bitterness from our lives by honestly expressing our feelings to God, forgiving those who have wronged us, and being content with what we have. And to meet him and embrace him and threw his arms around his neck and kissed him, and they both wept. Then Esau looked at the women and children and asked, "Who are these people with you?" "These are the children God has graciously given to me, your servant." Jacob repeatedly bowed before him. Finally, Joseph and Rachel came forward and bowed before him. "And what were all the flocks and herds I met as I came?" Esau asked. Jacob replied, "They are a gift, my lord, to assure your friendship." "My brother, I have plenty," Esau answered. "Keep what you have for yourself." But Jacob insisted, "No, if I have found favor with you, please accept this gift from me. And what a relief to see your friendly smile. It is like seeing the face of God. Please take this gift I have brought you, for God has given very gracious to me. I am more than enough." And because Jacob insisted, Esther finally accepted the gift. "Well," Esther said, "let's be going. I will lead the way." But Jacob replied, "You can see, my lord, that some of my children are very young, and the flocks and herds are very young too. If they are driven too hard, even for one day, all the animals could die. Please, my lord, go ahead of your servant. We will follow slowly at a pace that is comfortable for the livestock and the children. I will meet you at the seer." "All right," Esther said, "but at least let me assign some of my men to guide and protect you." Jacob responded, "That's not necessary. It's not enough that you receive me warmly, my lord." So Ezra turned around and started back to Seir that same day, and Jacob, on the other hand, traveled on to Succoth. There he built himself a house and made shelters for his livestock, and that is why the place was named Succoth, which means shelters. And later, having traveled all the way from the Padan Aram, Jacob arrived safely at the town of Shechem in the land of Canaan, and there he set up a camp outside the town. Jacob brought the plot of land before he camped from the family of Hamor, the father of Shechem, for 400 pieces of silver, and there he built an altar and named it Elelo Israel. I don't know how to say. This thing is like so big. Book. So, on Genesis 34. And if I go to the Bible, my Bible is so blurry. I need a new phone. One day, Dinah, the daughter of Jacob and Leah, this is revenge. It says revenge against Shechem. One day, Dinah, the daughter of Jacob and Leah, went to visit some of the young women who lived in the area, but when the Lord Prince, Shechem, son of Hamor, the Hivite, saw Dinah, he seized her and raped her. But then he fell in love with her and tried to win her affection with tender words. He said to his father Hamor, "Get me this young girl. I want to marry her." Soon Jacob heard that Shechem had defiled his daughter Dinah, but since his sons were out in the fields herding his livestock, he said nothing until they returned. Hamor, Shechem's father, came to discuss the matter with Jacob, and meanwhile Jacob's sons had come in from the field as soon as they heard what had happened. They were shocked and furious that their sister had been raped. Shechem had done a disgraceful thing against Jacob's family, something that should never be done. Hamor tried to speak with Jacob and his sons. "My son Shechem is truly in love with your daughter," he said. "Please let him marry her. In fact, let's arrange other marriages too. You give us your daughters for our sons, and we will give you our daughters for your sons. And you may live among us. The land is open to you. Settle here and trade with us, and feel free to buy property in the area." Then Shechem himself spoke to Dinah's father and brothers. "Please be kind to me and let me marry her." He begged in that word, "Do whatever you ask, no matter what dowry or gift you demand. I will gladly pay it. Just give me the girl as my wife." But since Shechem had defiled their sister Dinah, Jacob's sons responded deceitfully to Shechem and his father Hamor. They said to them, "We couldn't possibly allow this because you're not circumcised. It would be a disgrace for our sister to marry a man like you. But there is a solution. If every man among you would be circumcised like we are, then we will give you our daughters, and we will take your daughters for ourselves, and we will live among you and become one people. But if you don't agree to be circumcised, we will take her and be on our way." Hamor and her son Shechem agreed to the proposal. Shechem wasted no time in acting on this request, for he wanted Jacob's daughter desperately. Shechem was a highly respected member of his family, and he went with his father Hamor to present his proposal to the leaders at the town gate. "And these men are our friends," they said. "Let's invite them to live here among us and trade freely. Look, the land is large enough to hold them. We can take their daughters as wives and let them marry ours, but they will consider staying here and becoming one people with us. Only if all our men are circumcised, just as they are. But if we do this, all their livestock and possessions will eventually be ours. Come, let's agree to those terms and let them settle here among us." So all the men in the town council agreed with Hamor and Shechem, and every male in the town was circumcised. But 3 days later, when their wounds were still sore, 2 of Jacob's sons, Simon and Levi, who were Dinah's full brothers, took their swords and entered the town without opposition. Then they slaughtered every male there, including Hamor and his son Shechem. They killed them with their swords, then took Dinah from Shechem's house and returned to their camp. Meanwhile, the rest of Jacob's sons arrived. Finding the men slaughtered, they plundered the town because their sister had been defiled there. And they seized all the flocks and herds and donkeys, everything they could lay their hands on, both inside the town and outside in the fields. They looted all their wealth and plundered their houses, and they also took all their little children and wives and led them away as captives. Afterward, Jacob said to Simon and Levi, "You have ruined me. You made me stink among all the people of this land, among all the Canaanites and Perizzites. We are so full that they will join forces and crush us. I will be ruined, and my entire household will be wiped out. But why should we let him treat our sister like a prostitute? They retorted, angry. So it says Jacob's return to Bethel. Genesis 35. Then God said to Jacob, "Get ready and move to Bethel and settle there. Build an altar there to the God who appeared to you when you fled from your brother Esau." So Jacob told everyone in his household, "Get rid of all your pagan idols, purify yourself, and put on clean clothing. We are now going to Bethel, where I will build an altar to the God who answered my prayers when I was in distress. He has been with me wherever I have gone." And you just highlight this. And you can't see it, I don't know why. So they gave Jacob all their pagan idols and earrings, and he buried them under the great tree near Shechem. As they set up, a terror from God spread over the people and all the towns of that area, so no one attacked Jacob's family. Eventually, Jacob and his household arrived at Luz, also called Bethel and Canaan. Jacob built an altar there and named that place El Bethel, which means God of Bethel, because God has appeared to him there when he was fleeing from his brother Esau. Soon after this, Rebekah's oldest, Deborah, died, and she was buried beneath the oak tree in the valley below Bethel. Ever since, the tree has been called Elian Rebekah, which means oak of weeping. And now that Jacob had returned from Padan Aram, God appeared to him again at Bethel, and God blessed him, saying, "Your name is Jacob, but you will not be called Jacob any longer. From now on, your name will be Israel." So God renamed him Israel. And then God said, "I am El Shaddai, God Almighty." I guess that's how you say it. Be fruitful and multiply. You will become a great nation, even many nations. Kings will be among your descendants. And I will give you the land I once gave to Abraham and Isaac. Yes, I will give it to you and your descendants after you. Then God went up from the place where he spoken to Jacob. And Jacob set a stone pillar to mark the place where God had spoken to him. Then he poured wine over it as an offering to God, and anointed the pillar with olive oil. And Jacob named the place Bethel, which means house of God, because God has spoken to him there. So the deaths of Rachel and Isaac, Genesis 30. Genesis 35, verse 16. Leaving Bethel, Jacob and his clan moved on to Ephraim, but Rachel went into labor while they were still some distance away. Her labor pains were intense. After a very hard delivery, the midwife finally exclaimed, "Don't be afraid, you have another son." Rachel was about to die, but with her last breath, she named the baby Benel, which means son of my sorrow. The baby's father, however, called him Benjamin, which means son of my right hand. So Rachel died and was buried on the way to Ephraim, that is Bethlehem. And Jacob set up a stone monument over Rachel's grave, and it can be seen there to this day. Then Jacob traveled on and camped beyond the Me'agar while he was living there. Reuben had intercourse with Bala, his father's concubine, and Jacob soon heard about it. These are the names of the 12 sons of Jacob. The son of Leah were Reuben. Jacob's older sons, Simon, Levi, Judah, Ezra, and Zebulun. The sons of Rachel were Joseph and Benjamin. The sons of Bala. I can't find my other highlighters. The sons of Leah's servant were Gad and Asher. These are the names of the sons who were born unto Jacob Paddan. So Jacob returned to his father Isaac in Mamre, which is near Kiriath Arba, now called Hebron, where Abraham and Isaac had both lived as foreigners. Isaac lived for 180 years, and then he breathed his last breath. He breathed his last and died at a ripe old age, joining his ancestors in death, and his sons Ezra and Jacob buried him. So that's what it's telling me to read. Genesis. Genesis. Genesis 32 to 35, you wanted me to read the commentary book. So this is in the article. Rachel was angry. The competition between Rachel and Leah to give Jacob sons had hurt the sisters' relationship, and on top of that, Rachel was losing. Although Jacob still loved Rachel more, she was afraid that her inability to have children would make him love her less. Just like Rachel, who thought she needed to earn Jacob's love. Sometimes we try to earn God's love by what we do, but God loves us no matter what. All we need to do is accept God's love, which He gives us freely. There's only 2 pages. So Jacob and Ezra, Jacob and Ezra reconciled. Genesis 32:33. Genesis 42, verse 1, verse 8. En route to Canaan, Jacob met a band of angels and called the place Mala. 2 hosts of double camp. The 2 camps may be God's army. And Jacob entourage or 2 hosts may be a figurative expression for a great multitude. Ezra with greetings of peace. Then when he heard that Ezra was coming to meet him with a band of 400 men, he was so terrified that he divided his family into 2 companies, so that if the first group was destroyed, the second could flee. As Genesis chapter 32, 9-12, Jacob's prayer was born out of a desperate sense of need for divine protection. It was based on the ground of covenant relationship with the Lord that had established with him and his forefathers, and it was prayed in humility of spirit. He based his plea on the word of the Lord and claimed the promises of God. The first prayer comes from a strong inward necessity. By human security systems, we often protect ourselves from a demonic prayer life. Why do we do successive droves of animals totaling 580 head as gifts for Ezra, helping to appease him? Ezra would get the gift in 3 installments. Jacob's manners expressed his unbelief, or at least a mixture of faith and unbelief. Genesis 32, verse 22, verse 32. After sending his immediate family across the stream, Jacob, he were empty. Jacob spent the night alone at Peniel for what was to be one of the great experiences of his life. A man wrestled with him. That man was an angel. Hosea 12:4. Hosea what? So Hosea 12:4 says, yes, he wrestled with an angel and won. He wept and pleaded for a blessing from him. There at Bethel, he met God face to face and spoke to him. The Lord God of heaven armies, the Lord is his name. So now come back to your God. The angel of Jehovah, the Lord himself, the Lord put the socket of Jacob's hip out of joint, causing him to walk with a limp the rest of his life. Although Jacob lost the encounter physically, he won a great spiritual victory, and he learned to triumph over defeat and to be strong through weakness, empty of self and of confidence in his own cleverness. He confessed he was Jacob, a supplanter, a con man. God then changed his name to Israel, variously translated as God rules. One who strives with God, or a prince of God. Jacob called the name of the place Peniel, the face of God, because he realized he had seen the Lord. Perfect points that verse 32 is still true among Jews today. The sacrifice, the scattered nerve or thigh vein must be removed from the slaughtered animal before that portion of an animal may be prepared for consumption by Orthodox Jews. Genesis 33, verse 1 and 11. As Esau drew near, Jacob lapsed back into fearfulness and merely natural behavior, arranging his household in such a way to afford maximum protection for those he loved most. Jacob bowed himself to the ground 7 times as he approached his brother Esau. By comparison, was relaxed, warm, and effusive as he met Jacob first, then Jacob's wives and children. He protested mildly against the advocated gift of livestock, but finally consented to accept it. Jacob seems to have shown undue severity to his brother, speaking of himself as a servant. Some think that he restored to flattery and admiration and telling Esau that seeing his face was like seeing God. Others think that the face of God here means a recounted face. Genesis 32, verse 12-17. When Esau suggested that they travel back together, Jacob pretended this would be impossible because of the slow pace required by the children and young animals. Jacob promised to meet Esau in Seir, Edom, although he had no intention of doing so. Even when Esau tried to leave behind some of his men to travel with Jacob's household, the latter refused the other without revealing the real reasons, fear and substitution. Genesis 33, verse 18-20. Instead of traveling south to Mount Seir, Jacob went northwest. At length, he arrived in Shechem and settled there and erected an altar, which he perhaps presumptuously called Elul is Israel. God is the God of Israel. 20 years earlier, when God appeared to him at Bethel, Jacob had vowed that the Lord would be his God, and that he would give a tenth of his wealth to the Lord, and that he would establish Bethel as God's house. In Genesis chapter 28:20, verse 22, now instead of returning to Bethel, he settles 30 miles away in the Pharaoh area of Shechem, probably for the sake of his livestock. Shechem repents the world. I don't know what that noise is. And then God does not speak directly to him until several years later, and when he calls on Jacob to fulfill his vow, chapter 35. In the meantime, the tragic events of chapter 34 take place. So it says, the sins of Shechem, chapter Genesis 34. Somebody's in the bathroom. 'em. 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 Genesis 44, verse 112. So the name of God is not mentioned in this chapter. While Jacob and his family were living in Shechem, Dinah, his daughter, mingled socially with the heathen woman, a breach of proper separation from the ungodly. On one such occasion, Shechem, the son of Hamor, sexually assaulted her, then greatly desired to marry her. Realizing that Jacob and his sons were enraged, Hamor proposed a peaceful solution: intermarriage between the Israelites and Canaanites, and full rights for the Israelites as citizens of the land. Verse 9 can be seen as one of many satanic attempts to pollute the ungodly land. Shechem also offered to pay whatever dowry and gift was requested. Genesis 34, verse 13-24. The sons of Jacob had no intention of giving Dinah to Shechem, but they lied that they would do so if the men of the city would be circumcised. The sacred sign of God's covenant was to be used wickedly. In good faith, Hamor, Shechem, and all the men of their city met the condition. And then Genesis 34, verse 25, verse 31. But while the Shechemites were recovering from the surgery, Simon and Levi treacherously murdered them and plundered their wealth. When Jacob admitted a mild rebuke, Simon and Levi answered that their sister should not have been treated like a harlot prostitute. Actually, Jacob seemed to be more concerned about his own welfare than the horrible injustice that had been done to the men of Shechem. Notice his 8 uses of the first person pronoun in verse 30. Genesis 35, verse 1, verse 8. Chapter 35 opened with God's command to Jacob to fulfill the vow made about 30 years earlier. The Lord used the tragic events of the previous chapter to prepare the patriarch to do it. And notice that God is referred to about 20 times in this chapter, in contrast to no references in chapter 34. Before obeying God's command to return to Bethel, Jacob's first ordered his family to put away the foreign household gods and to put on clean clothes. As soon as they did this, they became a terror to their heathen neighbors. It was appropriate that Jacob should build an altar at El Bethel and worship the God who had protected him from his brother Esau. And then Genesis 35, verse 9-15. Once again, God stated that Jacob's name was about Israel and renewed the covenant he had made with Abraham and Isaac. The patriarch marked the sacred spot with a pillar and once again named the place Bethel. Genesis 35, verse 16, verse 20. As Jacob's family journeyed south from Bethel, Rachel died in childbirth, and she had named the child Benoni, son of my sorrow. But Jacob named his 12th son Benjamin, son of my right hand. These two names pre-picture the sufferings of Christ and the glories that would follow. The traditional, but probably not authentic site of Rachel's grave may still be seen on the road from Jerusalem to Bethlehem. Why was she not buried with Abraham, Sarah, and Rebekah in the cave of Hebron? Perhaps it was because she had brought idols into the family. Genesis 35, verse 21, verse 29. And a brief mention is made of Reuben's sin with Bala, his father's concubine, a sin by which he forfeited his birthright. The last sentence in verse 22 begins a new paragraph. Now the sons of Jacob were 12. The next two verses list 12 sons, though it says in verse 26 that these sons were born to Jacob and Padan Aram Benjamin is accepted. He was born in Canaan. Jacob returned to Hebron in time to see his father Isaac before he died. His mother, Rebecca, had died some years earlier. 3 funerals are recorded in the chapter: that of Deborah, Rebecca, nurse, of Rachel, verse 19, and Isaac, verse 29. Verse 39. So I'm gonna get off here for now, because probably wait till a little bit later to